à tous. Merci de votre participation. Pour écouter notre session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français.
Hello, bonjour, habari za leo. My name is Kevin Mutia.
Solofina Nekesa.
Lauren Arnza.
Ryan Fisher, Professional Officer at ICLE Africa. On behalf of ICLE Africa, the African Center for Cities, our future cities, and partners, I'm excited to welcome all of you to the Rise Africa 2021 Action Festival.
Rise Africa has been growing as a platform of thinkers, doers, enablers, committed to inspiring action for sustainable cities.
Rise Africa is about building active networks across academia, government, private sector, civil society, and the arts.
Our entry point is based not on articulating problems followed by proposing solutions, but rather on celebrating our cities as places of innovation and culture, while asking what more we can do to make them sustainable, inclusive, and vibrant.
This festival is hosting 46 sessions over 5 days from across 16 countries in Africa and the world. Every session aims to share new ideas, showcase ongoing actions, and launch new initiatives by bringing participants together to chart a new route forward.
We hope that the festival program will inspire you to commit to one or more specific actions that you or your organizations will take on. As this session closes, you will be redirected to a survey in which you can articulate these actions. We will follow up on this committed action throughout the year and offer resources, connections, and support. In this way, we are testing the idea that events can galvanize action, and we hope that you will join us in this effort.
Beyond this session, there are many ways to take part in the festival.
Register for further sessions.
Vote for your favorites in the photo competition.
Test your knowledge of African cities from our daily quiz.
Watch a variety of inspiring video provocations.
And listen and dance to the Rise Africa 2021 playlist.
We hope that you will make all attempts to reach out to new people and build lasting connections.
Before we begin, it's important to note that this session is being recorded and that by participating, you are consenting to be recorded. All recordings will be available on the program page after the festival.
Creative expression is vital for creating new futures for our cities. So we invite you to enter this session in the spirit of creativity and dreaming.
To my future children, I bequeath this continent, borders lowered and turned into a soft pile of dust, smooth sand under steady feet. Your birthright is a country of flowers, a city that holds you even with your complicated lineage, the way this city has held my heart, held its arms out for all of the lost people who found solace in it. Your heirloom is this land and all its wormholes, portals hidden in plain sight between city skyscrapers, where people from here resemble people from far away places, and differences are muted while life happens. I reimagine you a country that does not cage its doves, a bequest of waters that pool precious histories, mountains that stand guard to protect against the unknown, a nation who preserves compassion over everything else, a mouth that can hum many languages, and a spirit that rises above its fears.
Yes. Okay, so I could start now to talk about, firstly, we are urban artificial intelligence. In the Cairo Charter is urban artificial intelligence, AI enabling justice in cities in Africa. Okay. So now I'm Nadine. I'm going to talk with you about our content. Firstly, our agenda today, we are going to talk about the Cairo Charter, our theme and timeline, our goals and what we have reached till now. Then we're going to have a discussion with all of you about justice and AI in cities, challenges and opportunities brainstorm. Then we're going to have with Catherine a small lecture about technology contracts, insights from Central Africa. And the last thing will be a discussion with all of you about your experiences and success about success and failures in urban AI in Africa. So firstly, we are now going to talk about what's the Cairo Charter. Cairo Charter Urban AI in Africa for Social Environmental Justice have applied for a fund in November 2020. And then we have took this fund among eight winners from the Facebook and HSRC. These 8 winners were about from different countries in Africa. Some of them were from Kenya, Ethiopia, and others, and we were the only one to take it from Egypt. And now we are looking forward to develop a series of principles and protocols about urban AI in Cairo and to implement our ideas and how to apply this for the ecological and social justice. The Cairo Charters team, firstly, Dr. Samah Al-Khatib, she's the PI of the Cairo Charter and Associate Professor at Urban Design and Planning Department in Ain Shams University. And she now leads the Smart and Future Cities Laboratory for Smart Urban Solutions in Cairo. Catherine is an anthropologist, associate professor in social and cultural anthropology, and she has an interest in Asian technologies and society in Kinshasa. Minatullah Hindawi, for now she's a lecturer in Ain Shams University and PhD in planning the building environment, and her topic was about relation between media and cities. She have an interest in digitalization, urban development, and imaging power. Stephanie Sherman, she's a PhD candidate designer at University in California, San Diego, and she's a tutor in city design RCE London. And now the last thing is me, Nadine Ashraf. I'm graduated from Ain Shams University, Environmental Architecture and Urbanism, and now I'm working as a teaching assistant at Ain Shams University and a researcher assistant at the Smart and Future Cities Laboratory. And for now, I'm a collaborator in the Urban AI Cairo Charter project. So now we're gonna talk about what's urban AI with Stephanie.
Well, hi, everyone. Yeah, so our team met at a conference last year that was thinking about urban AI. And these are some of the ways that we think about it. That urban AI is imagining AI, artificial intelligence, machine intelligence, or synthetic intelligence, whatever you want to think about it as being embedded throughout an urban environment. And so we don't think about it as necessarily a single centralized brain. Rather, we think about it as an intelligent ecology, and that will be distributed throughout a city. So we're imagining networks of sensors, satellites, all exchanging feedback and programmed with certain kinds of decision making. And so obviously some of our work is to be thinking about what that programming looks like, and to which ends it's pointed towards, and that we think that there's potential for these automatic decisions to contribute to social and environmental justice. And part of what our team has been exploring is thinking about how the AI can inform planning, translation, financial services, transport, identity systems, and infrastructure. And we think about that first at the scale of the city of Cairo, which is where our focus has been. But of course, this can also be applied towards the regions, continents, even the planetary when it's appropriate. But we start with our city scale. Okay, we can continue to the next slide. If maybe we lost.
Sorry, we lost the connection, but we are back now.
Okay, great.
فين بقى
Super. Okay. Okay, so we can go to the next one now. Thank you, Mena. Okay. So this is probably like a pretty familiar image to most people, and I think a place where urban AI is intelligible and can also be intelligible as a public good, in the sense that transport infrastructure can really benefit from urban AI, whether that's from smart streets to traffic planning to waste services. Oh, yeah, great, thank you. And part of the programming, obviously, that we want to think about is how urban AI and transport infrastructure can contribute to access to parts of cities that might not normally be serviced by transport connectivity, by equity. So who's benefiting from new transport services and making sure that it's supporting the public good. And then also, of course, the ecological costs of transport, which are not only about carbon emissions, but are also about space allocations and how space in the city is being utilized. And so I think there's many obvious ways, from autonomous vehicles to smart cities, that are probably people are a bit more familiar with, which our imaginaries tend to go when we think about something like urban AI. We can go to the next one. Of course, there's other ways, maybe more ecological ways, that we can think about how urban AI might be able to start benefiting more green initiatives to green certain cities. So this was a project done with a group called Dark Matter Labs in collaboration with a think tank called Nesta. And they were really thinking about the interactions between public participation in terms of urban forests or urban tree planting, using cell phone applications and smart monitoring. So through the photographs that people were able to take throughout the city, starting to track and be able to detect growth and disease and needs for maintenance and caring throughout the city, and then also being able to measure the kind of impact. And what AI is really able to do is rather than replace people, which is commonly the narrative I think that we tend to think about, in this case, AI is actually encouraging participation and augmenting our capacity to nourish the ecology around us. So I think this project is on civic AI is a really good example of how an extra level of computation and calculation and watching over urban greenery can help. AI can also be very helpful in planning processes. So really helping large groups of people that are thinking about the myriad objectives in the city come together through various democratic voting initiatives or negotiations, and using AI through a software or an algorithmic basis to really understand how we want to make choices about development. And that's all I'm going to say about that, I think. Yeah, go ahead. Sama, you're muted.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie, and so happy to be here with you. I'm Dr. Samah, and now I will talk about the Cairo Urban AI Charter. Actually, as Nadine said, it was built based on a fund from Facebook Research, and actually it's built of the idea of Ain Charter. The idea of the Urban AI Charter, that we will develop a series of principle protocol for ecological and social justice driven AI. Articulate courses of urban AI for Cairo. Okay, so just to give you a glance about Ain Charter. Ain Charter is a name given to document advocating rational principle of town planning. It was emerged in 1933, and it was given its name by the location. It was carried in Ain. And actually it was supported by a statement, even a blueprint of how modern architects thought about the task of design the future city. Ain Charter, it was talking about the theme of the charter, who was involved in the charter, why it was successful. And actually, for us, it was the inspiration to make the Cairo Charter like the idea of Ain Charter. So what the reflection from Ain Charter on Cairo Urban AI Charter, we talked about that we thought about that we should think about who should be involved with us, who will be the audience for the Cairo Urban AI Charter, what would make it successful and not successful, what are the main elements. And actually, we reached that we will have this as a draft for the outline of the Cairo Urban AI Charter chapters. It will be like part one, it will be like general idea about the city and the region. Part two will be talking about the condition of the cities, critical examination. And what?
Please go ahead. You were disconnected for a little while, but please.
Okay, now we can hear me clearly. Okay. Conclusion and urban AI future in Cairo. So we had a timeline started from February 2021 with the first workshop we conducted online. It was to have an advisory board for the Urban AI Cairo Charter, and to investigate the urban AI ecosystem in Cairo. And then in March 2021, we conducted the second workshop. And the idea of this workshop to have an AI engagement with the academia, researcher, and expert as well. And we expected that we will have in end of May, we will conduct the third workshop to talk about the urban AI in the context of Cairo and also and beyond in Africa. And all of this we are doing to have the designathon, where we will have the policies, the proposals, and the charter idea to start writing the charter first draft. And by August, inshallah, we are planning to have the charter and to compose and complete writing it. So to talk briefly about our main goals from this project is what should urban AI do? What shouldn't urban AI do? What can people do with urban AI? And what do people want urban AI to do? And actually, this is really very tangible with what's happening in Egypt, because we are planning to have 20 smart cities in the future by 2030. And we are working hard to support our government and everyone working in smart cities, and AI, of course, urban AI will play a great role in this. We are looking forward actually to articulate possibilities of urban AI in Cairo, explore social and environmental responsibilities of urban AI in Cairo and beyond, determine acceptance of urban AI and where it is relevant, maximize the willing of use the AI among citizens and people, and even urban designer and urban planner. We are thinking of the equity as well, how it's the good access, the inclusion of people to the benefits and application of AI, the inclusion of urban AI, and what is the inclusion in Cairo, and what does it mean really in practice. Okay.
So hello, everyone. For now, we will be more having a discussion in the second part on speaking about how the Cairo Charter in general and urban AI in Africa in particular, how justice can be used in integration with AI to create better cities for the future. So to start with, we ask you to maybe scan this barcode or to enter to the website of Menti and enter this code in order to share your point of view. What are the 3 most important keywords that reflect for you or represent for you or relate to urban AI for justice in cities? We will be showing real time, just a second. We will be showing real time answers for what you will be sharing with us. Are you hearing us in a good way, or is the connection lost?
I have no problems hearing you.
Yeah, great. So this is the barcode. You can just scan it from your mobile phone camera, and you can enter on the website itself. Let me share it in the chat box and enter the code. Nice. Okay, that's 3. Eh? Oh. And I want to share as well the. Yes. I cannot see how many participants are actually in the session. We have now 5 responses with regard to what are the keywords related to urban AI for justice in cities. As you can see, it's more related to equity, access, cohesion, inclusion, transparency, nice, intersectionality, problem solving. Great. Great. We would be interested to also, like, if anyone would like to share their perspective, maybe, I don't know who wrote problem solving, if they would like to share their views regarding it. How do they see problem solving as part of the use of AI for justice, ecological or social justice in cities? Nice.
I would be curious to hear more about fairness. So somebody has written fairness. Maybe if that person would be willing to raise her or his hand or their hand, to talk a bit about what is imagined with fairness in this context here.
I cannot see if there is someone who is raising their hand.
I don't see it either. Or maybe, or if that person can write in the chat.
How to see the participant list?
Need to click on participants. If you click on participants.
Yeah, there's Slofonia. I was looking at problem solving more. Slofonia, you can take the mic and share your point of view if you like.
So Lufnina, is that fairness that are you responding to fairness in the chat?
I was responding to problem solving. How?
Sure. So you problem solving in a very efficient way.
Yeah, absolutely. For example, if there are water leaks in the city, then through some of these systems, they should be easily reported to the city council, and then it should also be able to respond as quick and efficiently as possible.
Okay, so there we need to add efficient communication. So problem solving can be like subdivided in step 1, efficient communication, and then step 2, efficient remedy. Right?
Sounds like it from my side, yes.
So I'm still pressing. I would like to have the person who wrote about fairness to maybe come in. And then I also see individuality. And I'm curious if that person would want to raise their hands and explain or just say something more about individuality.
You can just take the mic and speak. I'm unable to see who is raising their hands, if there is someone.
I don't think anyone is at this point. Like I'm raising my hand now. Do you see it?
Yeah, I see it, yes. So the idea, as Sameh mentioned earlier, that we were very inspired by the Athens Charter, and we, at the same time, we were responding to the call by Facebook on ethics and AI in Africa. And we thought that urban AI can be a good entry point to look at how the intersection of technology, smart cities, and at the same time, urbanism can be used to foster social and environmental justice in cities. And this is how we actually came together. We were a group at the Urban AI Network in collaboration with the Smart Cities Lab in Cairo. And this is how we were inspired by the Athens Charter to start by creating this protocol. In the future, we look forward to also develop more maybe technical oriented projects that involve more of the technological side, since we most of us are urban planners, but Katrine is an anthropologist, and she will give you later the overview more on smartness from below. So how the cities can actually move towards more urban AI or smartness, as she calls it, and we will discuss this later. It's interesting to see the keywords shared here, and like almost half of the participants shared their views. I would also be very interested to understand more on the perspective of individuality and fairness on it, but I see also a lot of connections of what is written in relation to urban AI for justice in cities. Of course, AI can be used for, like, there is a lot of debate about the ethics of the computational algorithms, but at the same time, this debate raises a lot of questions on how can technology be used in cities to reinforce justice. Of course, there are a lot of applications currently built, but it's important that our point of view is that to have the entry point in relation to social and environmental justice, especially in a context like Cairo and more broadly in Africa. So it's when we were thinking about this panel, we were very interested not only to share what we are doing, but also to open up the discussion with the participants. And since it's quite a lot of participants taking part in this session, we would be very interested to also stay in touch. I'm going to be sharing the chat box in the chat box a form in case you are interested to stay in touch about the next design-a-thon that we will be organizing in Cairo, or the next workshop, or if you would like to have a discussion in relation to what you're doing and technology and for justice in cities, we would be very interested to collaborate. So I will share the link. And right now, we would really be interested to have maybe more interaction in the next part. So the next part, we would like to open up the discussion more in relation to how do you think that urban AI could achieve justice in cities? So if we speak about the previous keywords in relation to connectivity or problem solving or fairness and individuality, how you see that urban AI can be one of the ways to achieve social and environmental justice, and what could be the challenges and opportunities.
Maybe to add there, Mena, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but maybe we may invite people then already to talk about the particular type of social injustice or environmental injustice that they would like to see solved, and then how. So if you think about urban AI as being a solution for a particular problem, producing a juster urban society, you may want to identify what needs remedy, what kind of social injustice and or environmental injustice you feel is important to address through AI nowadays in your city, the city from which you're speaking.
Yes, if anyone would like to take the discussion forward, please raise your hand, or you can speak directly as well. I will be muting my voice because we are in Cairo right now. We have the Adhan prayer, so I don't know if you hear me well at the moment.
We do.
Okay, great. So maybe, Katrine, we can share as well some of the insights from the previous workshop. So for example, in the first workshop that we conducted in March, there was a lot of direction into transportation and its relation to both social and environmental justice, and the role of AI in this direction.
Yes. And additional to that was also urban agriculture, food security in the city, and initiatives to maybe produce food within either the margins of the city or within the city in a more efficient way, and how AI could assist in that process, both in the food production as well as in the food delivery in the city itself. So please raise your hands, and I would give you the floor, or you can unmute yourself. So we have about 35 participants in this panel. So we really welcome people to share their own experiences and their own ideas and dreams also. This is about the future of the city. So we don't want to stick. Yes, there was
There's
someone. Yes, go ahead.
Please go on.
So I think, yes, Desiree Tesner-Smith, please you can talk now. You should be able to talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I'm speaking to you from Pretoria, and I just want to thank you for a very informative session. I was just thinking, if we, at the beginning of the session, it was a question I had was, how do you define justice and a just city as a starting point for such a project? And as we talk now about access and mobility and urban agriculture, maybe in the current context, public health is also an area where AI can play a big role.
Sure. Do you think about a particular topic or space of intervention that you think urban AI should be applied, or are you already experiencing an urban AI initiative that you think is working very well in Pretoria or elsewhere?
So in Pretoria, I am actually associated with the University of Pretoria, and we are involved as an anchor institution in the Hatfield City Improvement District, which is a district that's constituted of all the landowners in the university precinct. And our Department of Architecture is busy with a digital twinning project in the university precinct. So that was what was mentioned earlier about the sensors and so on, creating a digital twin of our precinct so that we can easily see what the effect would be of interventions, say in terms of transportation or other changes that we make, say densities, maybe extended trading hours for the retail sector in the area, whatever. So that's where we are. At the moment, it's still very much in the conceptual phase, so we haven't yet had results that we can discuss, but that is a big project that we will be focusing in our precinct.
And that sounds fascinating. So may I ask you, are you so the project is about identifying particular scenarios and their potential outcomes, and then the users can then decide for themselves which scenario they want to implement. And then a second question is, why are you still in a conceptual phase? Are there some blockages, or that's just the route that it's taking?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Catherine. Yes, I think it's basically just a question of the project that has to be implemented. It's not that there are specific blockages. We're doing this with the local municipality as a big stakeholder. So it's a joint project with the municipal authority in our area. But it's just that we've only recently started, so there are no blockages, but you're quite correct. It will be obviously a massive gathering of information, massive and continuous, and then to use that information to build scenarios around different interventions.
That's fascinating. So so how do you in your project define justice then?
So our project doesn't have justice identified as a specific focus. That's why I would be interested to hear also from you and the other participants how justice will be promoted and can be promoted through the use of AI.
That's also our main question. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wants to add, give an example, just like Desiree did?
I can also maybe give an example, like it's not using AI in particular, but using technology to map harassment. For example, in Cairo, I think it was in 2011, after the Egyptian revolution, there was a new initiative called Harass Map, and they were working on mapping harassment spatially in the city in order to show like where is it safe to go around, where is it not, but at the same time to make visible such a critical issue. Maybe there can be a way for AI to enter in this perspective, but of course it would need more research. I totally agree with the idea that for cities or ethics of AI for cities in this context, and especially if we go more from an African definition for it, it would be interesting to reflect on the local context of it. So if anyone that's technology related or is specific,
there's some problems with the connection from Cairo, I guess. Does anyone want to add? I think her emphasis on justice being
urban AI related, we would be interested to just, but right now we can also you cannot hear me?
There was a problem. You were like for more than half of a minute off.
So okay, so I think now you should be hearing me better, right?
Yes, indeed. Now it's much better.
Yes. So I was speaking about the definition of justice, and to go forward with it, in the next section, we will be discussing with Catherine the technology contracts and insights from Africa. She would be sharing with us what I mentioned earlier with regard to smartness from below. Maybe in this context, we can again later reflect on the definition of justice from this entry point, and to look at what are the successes and failures. So Catherine, I will leave the mic for you, and yeah, and then come back again for the discussion.
Okay, well, thank you. I hope you hear me well. And so indeed, this will be a different kind of intervention in this panel. I will be giving a mini lecture about my own research. My own research is in Kinshasa, located in Kinshasa. I'm speaking from Brussels, by the way. I work at the University in Leuven, and I'm an anthropologist. Since 2003, I've been carrying out research in Kinshasa, first on Kinshasa's media cultures. Since around 2014, I have started carrying out research on technology and the city. And since then, I've been working with technology designers, users, policy planners to a lesser extent in Kinshasa. And I've also participated in a policy-oriented workshop on smartening up Gulu, which is a mid-sized city in northern Uganda. And that's why there's also a map of Uganda. If you look, you see the word Uganda above it. The first word above it is Gulu. Next slide here, please. On this next slide, I am sharing an excerpt of a press article citing the ICT director of Kampala, Capital City Authority, Mr. Sekaja. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing his name correctly. I apologize for that. In which he was quoted reflecting about Kampala, capital city of Uganda, while I was in Gulu attending that workshop on smartening up Gulu. In the press article, the director of this institution, Kampala Capital City Authority, asked Kampala citizens not to destroy the new IT infrastructures that were going to be built also in Kampala, because there's this project of smartening up Kampala as well. And I found this request utterly significant, as it hints at an awareness of the authorities that citizens may engage violently with the materials of smart infrastructures. and that thus citizens' interactions with the material infrastructure would annul all efforts to render Kampala smarter. Now, I also think that Mr. Sekaja was somehow out of tune with the residents' life roles when he argued that the smartening up had to happen in order to render life more efficient, and that was less time consuming. After all, and this would be my critique, we should not forget that smartening up any city means facilitating the lives of people, helping people to live a better life. So not necessarily saving time. Next slide, please. So when Mr. Sekaja mentioned what he needed for Kampala to become a smart city, unsurprisingly, he focused on material stuff. Next slide, please. The material stuff, indeed, thank you. The material stuff included physical network coverage, a data center, open data exchange, the law, a regulatory framework, and then experts, including academic experts and people from innovation hubs. But he and many other policymakers seem to forget the necessity of a constant feedback between users and non-users, maybe more importantly, non-users, and designers. It's only then, when we're having that constant feedback, that we can design socially and culturally appropriate apps, software infrastructures, etc. And I think this constant feedback results in what I call a technology contract. So my contribution to this group of the Cairo Charter as an anthropologist is to emphasize the necessity of users, the necessity of listening and incorporating users' sensibilities and user sensibilities and desires when inventing or producing or promoting new AI tools and products. And I have captured this in the concept of technology contract. The technology contract is important for scholars as me studying technology and society, but I also think it is important for designers and policymakers. What is the technology contract? It's a notion that I developed, but inspired by a book published in 1990 already by Benedetta Jules Rosette. In this, I think, Terminal Science is one of the first books that studied ethnographically the implementation of computers in African institutions, firms, businesses. And so this book actually is an ethnography on computer education in Ivory Coast and Kenya. So one of the earliest sociological studies of IT in Africa. And there she develops the notion of computer contract. With a computer contract, she means the end of negotiations, the moment indicating either a mandate of acceptance or a violation of understandings. The computer contract, in her context, marks the moment when the machine's role in the enterprise is clearly established and accepted. The situation either may be positive or negative, but a positive, and we all actually would want a positive contract for sure. A positive contract links everyday practices to public discourse about the technology, and it is filled with success stories. And this is what we're trying to get at today as well. So drawing on Jules Rosette's definition of the computer contract, I understand the technology contract as the outcome of negotiations that speak to a society's acceptance, refusal, or partial acceptance of technological innovations. Taking inspiration from Benedetta Jules Rosette, then I'm proposing that we can transpose this idea of the contract to urban AI in Africa and beyond. Next slide, please. So I argue that as scholars, as designers, as policymakers, we need to attend to technology contracts. As scholars, we need to study technology contracts. As policymakers and as designers, we need to facilitate technology contracts. It's only then that we can arrive at sustainable, and just AI. What does a technology contract entail? First and foremost, it entails a set of practices around AI and new technologies. Practices by the designers, by those who are using the design during a test phase, but then also when it's starting to be used in general by the public, by the urban public. Then we need to listen attentively. So first we need to look at the set of practices around AI. Secondly, we need to listen carefully to the discursive realms surrounding AI inventions. For example, this meeting already is a way of triggering a discourse, listening to how people experience, reflect on, and assess particular AI inventions. So as economists, when they're setting, or economic entrepreneurs would first do a market study. Is there a market for what I want to become an entrepreneur in? AI designers and policymakers should be assessing the discursive realm and looking, are there users who actually want to use my design? We need to check the water, check what Cairene residents themselves expect from AI, imagine AI would do, imagine and fear, maybe fear harms that AI can bring along. For that, you need ethnographers. After all, the goal, according to me, please go back to the former slide. After all, the goal, I think, for AI designers and policymakers is to arrive at a contract, at an acceptance by the society in which the AI tool should be implemented. The technology contract is the end goal of a process of technological experimentation. It includes reflections on appropriate usages and advice and experiences and recommendations by users or non-users. I observed the necessity of a technology contract when studying the uptake of particular technologies in Kinshasa and the lack of that uptake for other technologies in Kinshasa. Next slide, please. First of all, I noticed that Quinoa, as Kinshasa's inhabitants are called, prefer technological inventions that have an immediate impact on their daily life. So Quinoa embrace technological interventions and inventions that have an immediate impact on their everyday. And that contrasts with the discourse of the government. The Congolese government, when they're talking about AI and technology, they talk about a future which may seem far away for the citizens. So, but despite the state's emphasis on the future, Quinoa are very much interested in the possibility of immediate innovation solutions. And I'm here giving some pictures of traffic robots, smart traffic robots that are replacing corrupt policemen in Kinshasa. These smart traffic robots have made life in the city significantly easier. Many of my interlocutors in Kinshasa during the course of my research claimed that city authorities should invest actually more in these robots and put them on all traffic hubs. And because these are innovations for the everyday that the population eagerly embraces. That kind of innovations are far removed from this utopian images that the Congolese government projects about smart cities for the future. These robots were installed in Kinshasa in 2014 and operate on several central roads in the city. They have been created by a female engineer at the Higher Institute of Applied Technologies in Kinshasa. So they have been created by this leading female engineer and a group of fellow engineers. These robots have, in the meantime, made the headlines of major world newspapers, inspiring debates about gender, aesthetics, and technological creation. So most Quinoa indeed applaud the installation of these intelligent traffic robots, taking over the work of policemen imitating the gestures of traffic police to control the flow of cars, trucks, and motorbikes. Powered by solar panels without batteries, nevertheless, to store energy, these robots mainly function during daytime. Now, what is important, Quinoa citizens did not burn down or tear down these robots, which is a huge contrast with the surveillance cameras that then President Kabila installed in Kinshasa, or the voting machine. No, please stay on, yes. Or the voting machines about which I will talk in an instance. And why so? Exactly because the robots, the traffic robots, relate to an experience shared by African city dwellers. As most Quinoa argue, the major gain of these intelligent traffic robots is that they replace corrupt policemen. And so they don't suffer anymore of being chased by policemen who then give false accusations of, for example, having ignored their signs, or of having too many passengers in the car, or of not having used a turn signal. So this innovation responds to a concern by the city dwellers, an immediate concern, their own concern. Next slide, please. Another characteristic of technology contracts is, as is true of any contract, holds that technology users must have credence with the other with whom the contract is negotiated. And here we come to the issues of trust, control, and balance. The use of AI, machines, technology requires trust, not only in the machine, but also in the engineers and designers, and in those who have enabled its fabrication, the investors, the sponsors. So political and social leaders. AI and the various devices and their designers and their producers and all those who have commissioned the technologies, they're all in a particular way masters of the machine. And users, if they distrust these masters, then they will not use the technology. Next slide, please. So, oh, sorry, stay on this slide. So what I'm showing here, no, sorry, I apologize. Please go, yes. So what I'm showing here is on the right, an image of a protest action in September 2018, but there were many during 2018. Late December 2018, the Congolese nation was entering a new phase in its political culture. There were presidential and provincial elections taking place. Now, already in February 2018, the president then, Joseph Kabila, and his government had announced to the citizens, Kinshasa and beyond, that voting was going to be electronically, that they had commissioned in South Korea voting machines, and that people would have to vote through these voting machines. In order to render the elections possible over this enormous national territory, this government had ordered the South Korean designers to produce electronic voting machines. Now, ever since Kinshasa's inhabitants learned that South Korean voting machines would be used during the next elections, there were expressions of skepticism and doubt. These were expressed online, but also via protest actions, as you can see here. On September the 3rd, 2018, the Lucha protest movement took to the streets against these voting machines. Others wrote against their usage and shared conspiracy theories through gossip and online. And later on, one of the premises in which hundreds of these machines were stored, was burnt down, literally destroying a huge batch of the machines. And why so? Well, Kinshasa's inhabitants doubted that the machine would do the work for which it was assumed to be designed. There is this conventional understanding of a voting machine that it suggests that the machine would transmit the vote of the voter, who has indicated in all privacy and confidence and with the touch of a fingertip her choices for president and members of parliament. However, it was commonly held that the voting machines would merely act out the agency of the makers, here an amalgam of commissioner and engineers, and that thus the voting machines would help the leadership to remain in power. So what these anxieties, so these manifestations are, these strikes and protest actions are manifestations of anxieties. What these anxieties imply is that the voting machine is considered to be a container of, and here I'm going to use an anthropological concept, distributed personhood, in which the user's agency, that of the voter, is minimized and even to some extent annulled by the intentions of those who have commissioned the machine, the ruling elite. Trust, or its lack, relates to perceptions of so-called masters, makers' intentions regarding one's well-being. So trust goes beyond trust in the machine or the device itself, but trust as an intersubjective experience projects intentions and purposes on the makers, creators, and sponsors of the new technologies. The voting machine, but we can extend that, extrapolate that to any other kind of AI intervention. It was here literally considered to be a mediator between various political actors, the citizen and those in power. Bringing the story back to the technology contract, the controversy about the voting machines in Kinshasa, and in particular, the refusal to use these devices, is a story where lack of trust in the machine was a metonym for lack of trust in the government. So it was not a refusal of the technology as such, rather it was a refusal to accept the masters or the makers of the machine as trustworthy partners in the negotiations. So when the head man of the ICT group, Kampala, requests the citizens not to burn down or harm the smart infrastructures of Kampala, that's not enough. You cannot just ask it. You need to work, you need to build towards gaining trust of the citizens. Next slide, please. Probably the most important, oh yes, so what I'm showing here actually is an image of The Simpsons. And also in the United States, there has been a lot of distrust in the results of the voting machines, the elections that were happening via the voting machines. So what I want to show here is that this is not an African problem. This is a general human problem where technology is being inserted. Thank you. Next slide, please. Probably the most important word in tech design is solution. In French, solution. Next slide, please. This word has become an idiolect, thank you, an idiolect, both in Kinshasa, but everywhere else, where people are discussing smart design, smart futures. Now, when we're taking into account what I've been saying about trust, and then also about these immediate benefits, I think by now it's clear that any design project should pay attention to users and communities that are supposed then to make use of the tech solutions. Their experience and their desires need to be taken into account. And that explains also the success of the various hackathons around the world. You see, maker spaces, organized hackathons in India and Vietnam, in the United Kingdom as well, in the US and Nigeria. And we are also going to organize a designathon in Cairo. And why so? Because we want to see what are the concerns of Cairo's residents and what is the fertile ground in which any AI solution would arrive. What is the fertile ground for an AI solution in Cairo? Next slide, please. In my own research on the invention of smartphone applications in Kinshasa, I learned how the backstories of digital innovation articulate interlocutors' apprehensions of urban sociality. So I've been following designers of mobile phone applications in Kinshasa, and I've been soliciting stories like why this tech solution? Maybe first a few examples of smart solutions in Kinshasa. The one that many people applauded was a software program that teachers could use to communicate immediately with the guardians of pupils. Another one was a mobile phone application in which Kinshasa's pupils, not only pupils, but children and young adolescents, could gain information regarding sexual health. A third one was a software program through which women who had just given birth could register their child in the town hall, but still from the hospital bed. And another software that was that seemed to be very much applauded in Kinshasa was a mobile phone application through which people in the diaspora could immediately pay for the medical fees of their relatives in Congo, or for the pharmacies, fees in pharmacies. What all these examples do is they're showing what local AI designers consider to be urban problems. In the case of the teachers that could communicate immediately with the guardians of the pupils, they complained that actually if a pupil gets expelled or has to write an essay, and actually instead of asking their guardians to sign, they would ask like a big brother or someone in the street, a friend, to sign. There was no way of being sure that the family of or the guardian of the child was informed. About the software program, young children can get sexual health information. There was, I was told that actually sexual education happens on the street, and children are getting information from elder boys in the street who may just want to engage in macho behavior, but they may be giving false information that might have serious health implications. Thirdly, with the women being able to register their child from the hospital bed, still in the maternity ward, they actually, that was actually a complaint against the fact that many fathers don't take up their responsibilities as a father, and they either do not want to formally acknowledge their child, maybe because it's born out of a second relationship, or he's not stable yet and didn't want of the child. So in that way, so that's a critique on certain behavior in Kinshasa. And finally, the software through which people in the diaspora could immediately pay for the medical fees in hospital or at pharmacies was, as I've been told, was because many people in Kinshasa lie to their kin in the diaspora about fake illnesses with an aunt or a grandmother, and then but in a way to get money themselves. So my analysis of these AI inventions show that Kinshasa's app designers do not bring in the machines to reduce costs or to speed up processes or projects, as the Kampala director imagines, or as any cost efficiency approach towards innovation also voices them. Rather, what they wanted to do was to rearrange the conventional distribution of obligations and the responsibilities. They wanted to undo a particular problem from too much social involvement. Ultimately, the innovations propose a new composition of social interdependencies by depriving an intimate other from privileges and duties. This shows the particular concerns of Kinshasa's AI inventors. It is imperative to listen to users and communities in order to know what to invent and how to invent it. This is the predicament of urban AI if it wants to be successful. On the next slide, you can see some of my publications in which I give ethnographic evidence and theoretical elaborations on these arguments. PDFs are also available on my academia.edu page. And now I would like to invite all of you here in the audience to present us some successful AI inventions in the cities where you are living and working, and explain why, according to you, these are successful. and the same about unsuccessful AI initiatives. And I would really want to ask you to, think out of the conventional AI box, and the conventional AI box of thinking talks about, speeding up, reducing the waiting queues, giving, it's really embedded within this trope of acceleration of our society. When we're thinking about justice and sustainability, I don't think we need to fall in the trap of acceleration being a solution. So may we invite all of you now to reimagine, urban AI, but then from, other forms of justice. Like I've been describing various kinds of injustice that Kinshasa's inhabitants are experiencing, and then how they either applaud or contest tech inventions because when they applaud because they counter various forms of injustice, and they contest because because these tech inventions would further various kinds of injustice. And then we can think about the voting machines. So this was my lecture. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I would like to have a very passionate conversation about justice and urban AI. Thank you. So anyone who wants to engage in this conversation, either please raise your hand, or you can write in the chat, and then we deal with the chats. So the floor is open. Are there any AI designers here in the room? And do they want to maybe share their ideas of what they want to solve with their AI design and how it differs? Or are you indeed buying into the acceleration discourse? And that's fine too, but there are some risks then, I guess. And don't worry, there's no wrong answer. This is experimentation.
Catherine, I think I can contribute to this so people
Sure.
can. Hi, Catherine, are you hearing me?
Totally, yes, very well.
So I think I can contribute in this so people can get some idea and then start participating. So I will talk about one of the recent initiative in Egypt, which is Egypt Bike Sharing Initiative. It was a founder from the GEF Small Grant Program, and it was located in Fayoum University. The idea of this is to enhance the bike sharing among the youth in Egypt, and actually it built off that they can rent it and they can use the mobile phone application to rent the bike and then have it and then reallocate it again in the same location. So it was opened in 2020. And actually the main idea is to promote for sustainable urban transport. And they have other small initiatives related to this, related to have a safe cycling roads and how to select the cycling roads. So maybe anyone can contribute if they have similar to this. For us, it was the first project like this open in Egypt.
But then the question is it successful or not?
Based on the review, I didn't participate in this, but based on the review I read of this project, it was successful. It encouraged many youth in Fayoum University to use cycling. And actually they organized some marathon and some activities using cycling. And they also made some roads for cycling tracks available for the people to use it safely with physical barriers. It encouraged people also to use it.
So it was. So the bike lanes, were they created after the AI initiative, or they had been or this was a separate? This had nothing. There was no logical.
They put at first 2,000 bicycles to be used among the university students. And then they start to make the initiative of having this sharing. So they have the mobile application where a student can rent a car and apply to have this free cycle. So it's bicycle, and then they can return it back. I don't know if I can share this. I will check with Nadine. I can share it with you also, so you can have a scope about this initiative. It's Fayoum is not a big city. It's a small city, and it's one of the poorest cities in Egypt. So and it's really one of the beautiful in terms of natural and environmental aspects. So having a cycling there and using the cycle, it's really very interesting there. So they encourage students to use cycling and to have this mobile application to make them contribute to have the cycling. So from what I read, it's shared now. If you can see it,
yes.
You can go down, Minna. So this is the lane, that I told you, that they make a lane especially for cycling passes. Yeah. And then here where they made the whole system where they can have the parking of the bikes and everything.
Nice. Was there a bike culture before in that city?
We have it, but not through the mobile phone. We have it in the informal areas, or even in many areas in Cairo. We have it in small shops. You can go there and rent a bicycle. And even if you go to in some cities in the coast, or even some touristic sites, you can even rent it. But we didn't have it as an initiative like this before.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Could someone else in the audience, where we have 26 participants, anyone else could maybe share some examples? We really want this session to be interactive. You may also critique, you may also give critique on my mini lecture, or you may also question the plausibility or the necessity of a Cairo charter. We are all ears. Like Desiree, sorry to be calling you out if you're still here. Yes, you are. I hope you're okay with me calling you out. But you've been talking about, that this initiative in Pretoria. Do you see that that before the initiative was starting, although you're still in your or do you see that part of the conceptual phase is also part of dialoguing with people and checking in how far people are desiring this and would step into it?
So we have a culture in the Hatfield precinct of surveying every year, a very thorough survey of all the stakeholders in the area, their views on what is important, what should get more attention, what they like about the area, what they feel has improved since the previous year, etc., etc. It's quite comprehensive. But as far as the digital twinning project is concerned, we speak about it at all the forums, the whole notion of smart cities, etc. But for that specifically, we draw on that general survey that we run every year. So we haven't had a separate process for the digital twinning project. Of course, as you were speaking, I was just thinking that there will always be elements in an area that are not in favor of certain AI interventions. For instance, in the Hatfield area, obviously security enjoys a lot of priority because of the large student population, many of whom are pedestrians in the area and have to be out after dark, and their safety is a big concern. So the whole of Hatfield has been fitted with closed circuit television cameras, and it's very closely monitored, and we make use of quite smart technologies. We have number plate recognition that can look out for suspicious vehicles that have been noticed elsewhere in the city, etc., etc. So obviously those technologies, those interventions are not going to be received well by a certain sector of that area. So we do understand that, and that is a concern. But I expect that as we start implementing more and more our technological solutions, those will also be specifically reflected in the survey that we conduct annually.
Thank you. If you're saying that like these surveillance cameras are not received well in certain areas, what happens? How does that not receiving well materialize? Do people destroy them like in Kinshasa?
We've had a few incidents. Generally, they are designed in such a manner that they are quite vandal-proof, but there have been attempts to destroy them in some areas. So yes, I mean, and that I suppose one would expect anywhere where you start squeezing the criminal element, they are going to push back.
Yeah, totally. So thank you for that intervention, and thank you also for the link that you wrote in the chat. I'm going to look it up. Someone else from the audience, or should I look for a volunteer?
Maybe I can also share like one.
Sorry, Mena, we have someone. Maybe after Winnie Okello, okay?
Yeah.
So please, Winnie, go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon, wherever you are. So first of all, it's more of a comment, kind of. I really do like the fact that one of you mentioned the issue of safety, and especially when we talk about urbanization and smart cities, one of the things that often gets overlooked in the context of safety, right, or public safety, is that issue that was mentioned earlier in context of harassment and assault, right? And that looks different depending where you are, whether it's street harassment, transit harassment, sexual harassment, or any of those kind of other, incidents. We often there's currently like a big data gap, especially in context of intersectionality. And so a quick plug for HARP here, that's the harassment and assault reporting platform. I know we're starting to see more innovations around that specifically. So, I mean, that's just one of the few that I have come across that specifically caters to collecting more of the intersectionality data, because we understand that contextual data really is what's needed at this point moving forward. Historically, it's been just, just get the traditional like data in, data out. But I'm glad to see that, especially in this context of just cities and equitable cities and equitably inclusive cities, we have to really take into account people's intersectionality and not disregard that, because that really plays a role into the way the data is analyzed and the way the policies are therefore made in correlation to those data points. So again, quick plug for HARP. If you guys want to connect, I'd love to hear more of what you guys are thinking in that area, and also how we could maybe get more of this type of innovations into wherever the urbanization is taking place, whether in small cities or larger cities, because we know this is an issue all across the board, including in our rural areas. So just in terms of like a safety measure, I think I'm glad that is part of the conversational sphere. So thank you.
So, great, Winnie. So if I'm correct, like your main message is that when we're thinking about justice, We not only need to think about innovations that have a just cause, but we also need to think about the data and that they are going to be analyzed and used in a just way.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's an important point. Huh?
Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mena, you can take. And in the meantime, I'm inviting again others to take the floor. Huh? Just raise your hand and we're all ears. In the meantime, Mena is going to talk.
Yes, it's actually very much related to Winnie's comment on the use of data. I will share with you now the work of one of our partners in the project. It's an initiative in Cairo. It's the Transport for Cairo, and they are basically doing, they are kind of mapping data, making data visible in relation to transportation. One part is very much related to safety as well, maybe harassment in this direction, if we speak to what's related, we discussed earlier, but also more generally to how the use of technology can make transportation or public transportation maybe easier by clarifying, for example, the transit points or the transit journeys, and to make it somehow more systemized in a way, in a context that's very informal. I will share the link of the initiative in the chat box as well, in case you're interested to know more about it. And they are going to be one of our partners as well in the Designathon in August. So the idea of the Designathon that we will be first mapping the urban AI initiatives in Cairo, in Africa and beyond as well. And at the same time, we will be moving forward to discuss how the use of urban AI can facilitate more just and sustainable cities, and to produce a Cairo charter in this direction. We plan, like after the Designathon, to take this charter forward and to implement whether education curriculum activities related to academia, and at the same time to apply for funding in order to take it forward as well. So it will be great if you're interested to join us in the Designathon, and if you know about a specific initiative, I saw in the chat box that some participants shared some of the initiatives that we can definitely include in our mapping. We would be happy to stay in touch.
Thank you, Mena. May I ask other people here in our Zoom room, to maybe share some of their experiences? We need some stories about unsuccessful projects, I think, because it's from those that we will learn the most. Why were they unsuccessful? And then how to try to make them more successful. I think what I see in Kinshasa, one of the main reasons why certain inventions, someone is joining, is very difficult, is because of the hegemony of telephone companies still within the whole smart infrastructure. Yes, Winnie, you could, yes. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I'll be quick. In terms of what I've seen, both in the continent and even during my travels, is in context of things that maybe are not as successful as we thought they would be, in general, is especially the deployment of, let's say, our 5G towers, right? Our higher tech implementations, sometimes even when in context of transport, because I work in this transport sector, is implementation of smart tech for regulatory compliance. When I see residents or regular constituents having difficulty adapting to this new technology, oftentimes it's because they haven't been given like clear information. The education and awareness aspect and community buy-in is usually very limited, and especially as a fellow professional in the STEM fields, that is one of my biggest criticisms in how we operate and how we design the built environment, right? we often take out the human element of engineering and design and development. We take out the human element and say, oh, you know, we've done the research, the data says this, and and this is for the good of the community, and therefore we will go ahead and, you know, and state it, and they should be grateful to us, right? Because it's going to make their life better. You know, and I mean, and even when we see different innovations that technically are supposed to be good for the community, but we never really take their input, or even when we do those community engagement, but what we do is do presentations and not discussions, because I've seen that happen a lot, where you're like, we're trying to convince you to accept this innovation, but I'm presenting it to you and not necessarily putting it in a way that I'm allowing you to come and provide discourse and disagree with us and counter that offer and say, hey, can we try it like this? So for me, I've seen that gap in true community engagement and true education and awareness. Really, that's the thing, because once you demystify, you know, and make the technical practical, and when we really need to start talking in plain English. I know it's, you know, the technical terms are really good for, you know, our technical review spheres, but we need to make our technical research more practical for the general audience, because our policymakers speak in regular English, let's be honest. And the people who are impacted by our project speak in regular English, or whatever that local dialect is. So we need to really bridge that gap in communication and education of the smart technology if we are going to have effective implementation. Thank you.
So I think, thank you, Winnie. So I think you agree with the fact that we need this kind of technology contract, and that the intended users actually should be like co-designers of.
Oh, absolutely. From planning.
Yes.
Yes.
Co-designers in their intervention and in the planning. Thank you, Winnie. Who wants to add some thoughts here? Or you can also say, you know, you can bring in an example of something of which you say, this is something that works so well, but that cannot easily be transposed to another city or to another society. Think about the kinds of AI that you are using in your own daily life, and then reflect, why am I using them? And am I, as a technologist, the only one using them? Or is this an invention that is being used by a lot of people? And what is the success factor here? What is the success actor here in this invention? Anyone? Solofina, I see you've raised your hands. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Katrine. And I just want to note that, so I grew up in Uganda, and I think one of the things that has really stood out up to now is the issue to do with mobile money. And I don't know where to categorize this. Is this artificial intelligence? Is this tech? Is this, you know, that sort of thing? But it's really, it plays on the fact that everyone has a mobile phone. It's not necessarily a smart mobile phone, but it is a mobile phone. So you do not need internet. You just need connectivity to be able to access your money on a mobile phone. You don't need to go to the bank, because then the banks are very much designed in terms of language barrier and location. It's not easy to access. But with a mobile money point, you just go to literally just take a walk to the town center, and then you withdraw money, or you can send money to someone else in another city. So in a way, that has really taken off in Uganda, in Kenya. But interestingly, I moved to Cape Town, and you know, it's the banking app is more, it has been used more. Is it because there's more access to internet? Is it because the higher literacy rates, or the bank was able to really reach the deepest of like places, towns, villages, and that sort of thing? So this really shows quite an interesting contrast in two technologies that are potentially beneficial, but the way they're being received in two separate contexts, and the way one has set off in one and not the other has been quite interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Solofnina, for that example. Actually, there's a lot of research that has been done on trying to explain the success and then the failure of it elsewhere. And then one of the reasons of its limited success in South Africa is the fact that the South African government regulates the financial transactions much more than Uganda and Kenya did at the beginning. So the telephone companies need to pay more taxes in South Africa than in Uganda and Kenya. So it's more expensive. That's what I've read. But maybe you can disagree with that. And Winnie wants to add something on that, I think. But at least that's what I've read.
Maybe before Winnie, I could also add that even just being in the two contexts is really the strength of the banking sector here. And maybe it comes with also the edge of the banking sector, how much power and wealth that is associated in that issues such as, and trust, you know, so that's why banking here is stronger, whereas in Uganda, you have a higher illiterate population, you have lesser internet, and in a way, and of course, in addition to all the other contextual issues that you mentioned, so it was easier for mobile money to take context, but it's quite interesting.
Yeah, and we actually might want to think what kind of social justice mobile money achieves. Winnie? You've raised your hands?
Yes. Oh, that is actually a good segue. Yes. So, right. In as much as, you know, I love the fact that mobile money has really made access to banking, access to funds, and even in some ways made it safer to walk around with funds or excess funds, right? But on the flip side also, right, when we talk about learning from our failures or learning from not so great implementations, really, we've also seen on the flip side opportunities of abuse, especially if we're talking about elder abuse, or, you know, how it's sometimes depending on how the mobile money is set up, people misuse, or people it's called financial abuse, but like people can take, especially when we talk about elderly people, and where they have somebody else operating the equipment, operating the telephone system for them. We've seen quite often that
I've actually written about that in Kinshasa, in which grandchildren are asked by their grandparents to make phone calls on their behalf, or to manipulate the phone on their behalf, and then the grandparents afterwards they learn that all the phone credit is gone, for example. So that's something that I've observed in Kinshasa as well. So on the one hand, the mobile money initiative was designed to bring in some more social justice in order so that people could more easily pay school fees, or pay back money that was lent by someone. But it has produced new forms of injustice.
Yeah, right. That is like part of the unintended, right, side effects of these things, where, you know, and as much, because like when you sit on the drawing board in the planning sessions, you think of all these ways to make it work, and sometimes we overlook that's really in your face, simple, like, oh, this is a potential flaw. But it's okay. That's part of the human element of what we do, because it's like humans will always show you, we will find a way to be, innovative, good, bad, or indifferent.
That's what I call smart from below.
Exactly. So for me, I guess it was just my proposal is just, maybe that is one of those areas of improvement that maybe we could do more research or emphasis in trying to bridge that.
With great example, Winnie. Thank you. I'd like to trigger some people whose voices we haven't heard yet. So I see Tristan, Stephen, Sandra, Rashik, Poloko, Manal, Lola, Laura, Lamis, Kaylin, Irena, Arik, Aline, Jessica. If anyone, I'm sure all of you are using tech in a particular way already. This meeting here is only possible because of AI. Does any one of you wants to add something to our discussion, or maybe contradict something? This is a zone of experimentation to think and rethink urban AI, to think and rethink justice and social justice, environmental justice, and yeah, to rethink also in a sense that like what could the costs be, social costs, if we implement a new initiative that wants to address a particular social problem. I'm going to, give the floor to a man, because we've been so I know Tristan is a man's name, Tristan van Rijn. Thank you. You've unmuted yourself. Oh no, you're gone. He's gone now. Oi, Stephen? Remain silent. Oh, Tristan is back. The success of our panel obviously depends on the interaction between us and people in the panel. Yes, hello?
There we go. Technical difficulties.
Oh, I was afraid that I had scared you off.
No worries. I mean, I was interested to know a little bit more perhaps about the voting system you were talking about. Just made me think, I'm afraid I don't have any of these super interesting examples that you guys are bringing to the table. But one thing I was interested in made me think a bit of the Sidewalk project in Toronto, which I think was a Google-led thing, which recently the locals basically kicked it out and said that they didn't want Google building this smart neighborhood in Toronto because they basically didn't trust it, because they're essentially only seeing it as Google wanting to just collect your data so that they can sell you other stuff. But then I was also thinking it's interesting with what you're saying in Kinshasa, in that, that was a state-led thing and it was just as untrustworthy effectively. Nobody believed in it. And, how do you overcome that, right? So I mean, the thoughts that I have for that would be that you have to have a sort of a third element, sort of, local community-based things. But then also what you were saying with sort of grandparents getting their children to help with phones. Maybe that is how you do it. If you kind of build out, we're going to have to build people's capabilities and skills in AI to be able to, build this future in Africa. So, if you're investing in local community centers, perhaps where you get teenagers involved in AI and rudimentary things, perhaps as, we've heard some examples like urban agriculture, things like that, just to train them up and, who you're going to trust better, your family, that's where they get the conspiracies from, but that's where you could also basically teach them the correct way that things happen and sort of, make it more transparent and accessible to everyone. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on that.
Thank you. I think the chain, what you mentioned, the chain is indeed a crucial thing. And I think that's also where NGOs fail sometimes, because they emphasize, they target a particular group and then don't get at that particular group and just then abandon, while maybe if you would, accept that someone else, maybe who has been sent by someone else to attend the meeting, and then trust on the fact that that person will relay the information, then your project or your message can get across. So indeed, we may want to think about urban AI in Africa to be more attentive to this chain of individuals, and that maybe, some users, maybe we need to think about, end users, and then just people before the end users, and imagine these people before the end users to be the actual material users of the device, but relying on them to reach the end users. So this could actually be something that I would expect to be very efficient, if we need to use a particular, a word which I don't like to use that much, but if you want to have more efficient communication, then maybe we need to think about the chain of people through which certain information has to come, because you've got rules of mobility and immobility. And that in the chapter in which I describe why elderly people rely on their grandchildren to do mobile phone communication, it's not only because grandparents are less media literate than their grandchildren. An additional and actually fundamental component is that grandparents, they are supposed to be immobile. And they, because of their senior, in Kinshasa at least, and because of the seniority, they can have others performing and enacting their chores, their initiatives, whatever come. Like if an elderly person is supposed to take a major role in a ritual, then there's no problem if that elderly person doesn't show up but has sent one of his classificatory sons to do the job. But if that person arrives on the stage with the idea that, with the message, I've been sent and I've been instructed by my father or grandfather to do this, then the community will accept this. So this replacement, this representation is something that I have seen in Kinshasa. And I think that's the chain that Tristan van Rijn is also talking about. And maybe AI designers for Africa will, I would maybe encourage them to take that social reality into account. I see that Sandra wants to say something. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm calling from Cape Town, but I'm originally from Johannesburg, and I'm a candidate landscape architect. From my perspective, I'm interested in how to incorporate socio-environmental systems. So not just have more socially based initiatives or more environmentally based, but something that takes both into account. And a thought that came to mind was how we can use AI for monitoring and environmental justice. Like, for example, in Johannesburg, we've got a lot of mine dumps, and still there's remining of mines in areas where there are communities, and these communities are being affected. So communities are already taking their own records of like dust samples, as well as pollution in their rivers and that sort of a thing. And I was just thinking that AI can support more citizen science-based initiatives, and as well as to gather a database of evidence so that these affected communities can actually have evidence when they go to court to fight against these like mining companies and other similar environmentally destructive, whatever that's just harming their space and the environment. That's all.
Well, that's all, but I think it's a crucial one. Here you're really talking about the law, the fundamental, the first definition of justice, people having fair access to defense and to protect their own property. So yeah, I think that's a very important example. And so what you're suggesting is AI being able to be enrolled in, in building up that protection and archiving evidence that then can be shown, mobilized in particular justice settings in court and so on. Great idea. Thank you. Are we maybe getting an idea from Lamis El Khatib? Oh yes, Lamis just wrote. You can actually unmute yourself and tell us what you've written. Lamis?
Hello.
Hello.
I have a question that these days Egypt vision for the upcoming years is to have new cities like Alamein or the new capital, and it's supposed to be smart. So my question here is, how can the old city become smart too, and it won't die out with the technologies and the smart techniques that are happening? How can it cope, and what developments can we do to such places in the old Cairo, especially the informal settlements?
Great question, but I have no knowledge about Cairo, so I'm going to invite Mena or Sama to respond on this.
Okay. I think it's really very difficult question to answer because the informal settlement situation in Egypt is really very complicated because some area already suffering from not having the basic infrastructure. So in some areas they don't have sanitation systems, they don't have pure water. So we have different type of informal settlement in Egypt. Some of them that we that going under area under risk, that they should have immediate development plan from the government. And some areas are informal, but they have all the facilities, but they built in the land that they didn't own it from the beginning. So the idea now, how can we cope with what's happening in the new cities and what we are planning to have in 20 smart cities in the future? From my point of view, that it will not be something comprehensive. It will be like initiatives, small initiatives that will happen in certain area, maybe like the cycling initiative that we shared or any other initiative. It can work separately in certain informal area, and then if it will be success, it will be replicated in another one. Maybe, especially after Corona and after the COVID-19 and what happened, that people already now having their lecture and studying through the internet, even in those informal areas. So the acceptance from people to practice in the technology or having some technology support will happen now or in the coming years. It's coming. Yeah. So from my point of view, it will be difficult to have a whole comprehensive plan to cover all the informal areas in Egypt. But it can be started like some initiatives in certain areas, and then replicated in another one, and then replicated in another one. And that's what's happening already in the participation and the participatory development plans in some areas. GIZ, for example, and other entities in Egypt make some participatory plans to develop those areas. And actually they select some informal areas to make a first phase, and then they can replicate it to another areas. So maybe it can be implemented like this. I don't know if I answered you correct, but hopefully in the future we can see this intervention of AI and urban AI in informal settlement in Egypt.
Thank you.
Okay, Catherine.
Yes, thank you. Maybe Poloko Kome. I would like to invite Poloko Kome to unmute himself or herself and to join the conversation, to give an example of an AI initiative in his or her city. Poloko, are you still around?
Yes, I'm still around. I don't know how.
Yes. Hello, where are you talking from?
I'm talking from Cape Town.
Oh, everybody is in South Africa.
See, so an initiative of AI that I can give is basically there's a student, one of the students at is this loud enough?
I have some difficulties. If you can raise your voice a bit.
Okay, I'll try speak a bit louder. Is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So an initiative from around Cape Town. In fact, it was developed by students from the University of Cape Town, called Jonga, and what it's more around security and safety in the environment as well. So what Jonga does is, if there's a security concern, or if there's a robbery or a safety issue within the community or area, you basically just click on a button on your mobile device, and then that alerts all the people around who have the same mobile device. application as you do, out the Jonga app, and then it alerts the people around in the community that there's a safety concern, and it gives an update and what the progress is or development around that specific security concern. So that's just one of the systems that AI innovative applications that I've come across from around here. I don't know if...
Yeah, and I would like to hear more, like, are you using it? Have you used it for a particular reason? Did you have to push the button? And then how successful is it? Is it like something that all students are using?
Not really. I've only used it, I think, once or twice a while ago, but it's not as yet. It's still only getting out into the students. It isn't yet as big. It's still only being developed. It was only started a few years ago by students from the university, so they're still in trying to get it off the ground and developing it and growing it. Yeah.
So I think I think it's a wonderful example of, local inventors dialoguing with local realities and then trying to find a tech solution for a local problem. But I think the second part of your story is very, it's familiar to what I've heard in Kinshasa, but it's as crucial for when talking about the difficulties about AI on the African continent, is that it's very difficult for tech investors, for tech inventors to find investors, or to just get on, the Play Store, or to get on Android, and to be available to users. And so, and in my own work, I've written about that, and I've accused tech capitalism of cannibalizing local inventions, and this is what I see in Kinshasa. Orange, Vodacom, and those companies, they're actually also monopolizing the APIs, which is this technical facility that needs to open up, to put that is necessary in order to put an AI invention on the digital marketplace, as to speak. And I think the people that you're talking about are struggling with the same problem: no access to the tech markets, despite having all the good ideas, knowing how to realize it, but they're just, not on the same boat, or they're excluded because of tech capitalism.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct, and I agree with that.
And so what's the solution for that? Most probably urban authorities and national authorities need to rethink their priorities. And instead of giving all leverage to these telephone companies, they also need to start giving more maneuvering space and negotiation space to the local designers, whose votes and voices they actually need also when the new elections coming up. So I don't know if anyone here in the room is part of an authority institute, or an institution, or part of power. But so I would like, if so, then I would certainly invite that person to maybe contradict what I've been saying, to give another voice, another opinion. But I think, Poloko, I'm very happy with your testimony and with your reflections. Thank you. So we're nearly closing. I don't see any hands raised anymore, and I'm not going to force people anymore to talk. Oh, Irene, do you want to say something?
Yes, my name is Irene from Kenya. And maybe I could cite an example of, I don't know whether I would call it artificial intelligence or a technology that in the past 2 years in Kenya, an institute known as Open Institute identified the challenge that we have as a country when it comes to access to spaces by the people who live with disability. So the institute took up the initiative to conduct a collection of data and mapping of the streets and also buildings, both the buildings both internally and externally, just to identify the places that are risky for the people to access, especially the people who are blind and the lame. And thereafter, they integrated the data from the mapping exercise into the OpenStreetMap in the country. And this was focused on the Nairobi Central Business District. And this data is actually available till date on their websites. And the institute itself has been trying to engage with the county government and also the national government to see how this can be taken up as a national issue. However, we find that there have been challenges, especially when it comes to the point of engaging with the national stakeholders. But we find that this is a project that is working because most of the persons living with disability who are actually aware of this project are using the application just to identify the spaces that they can use whenever they want to go to the city and the buildings that they think they can access their services in a more simplified manner. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's a kind of a success anyways. The intended users are using the app, right?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. So Sama, I'm giving the floor to you.
Okay, I would like by the end of the session to thank everyone participated today with us. It was our pleasure to be there, and thank you for Rise Africa Festival for having us today. Actually, it's very excited that this year we made many work with Africa, the Africa continent. For me, it was the first time to have all of this involvement with the continent, although that I'm from this continent. But actually, so happy that we have grown and we have new colleagues, and we are exploring more work and initiatives in African cities. I hope that we can have all of you in the Designathon. Maybe it will be in September or end of August, maybe even virtually. So it will be good that people can participate with us in the Designathon. Maybe in the future we will have some future work with the people from South Africa. We have many of them today, and actually the discussion, and I would like to thank really Catherine very much for the discussion. It was very fruitful to hear from people and to hear how they see the successful AI initiative of projects in Africa. We are now in the future. COVID-19 made the technology and everything accelerating the process of everything. So actually, we think that AI will have a great success in the future in the African continent, because people now are depending a lot in their smartphone, in the technology, more than ever than before. We have, even in Egypt, I will talk in the Egyptian context, now we have many other initiatives regarding the smart education. We have even the new smart cities that we are already working on them. And actually all of the colleges and universities, most of them are now planning to have the smart city departments in their universities or faculties. So the future is ours now. So let's plan for having a fruitful future for urban AI, and looking forward for future cooperation. And please feel free to join the Google form. It's written in the chat, so we can contact you in the future to attend the Designathon. And of course, when we publish it, it will be available online, the Cairo Charter, and hopefully it will be end of this year that we have the whole publication. Thank you.
Yeah, and to add to that, we want then you also to propagate the Cairo Charter, to evangelize it.
Thanks a lot, Katrine, and thanks a lot, Katrine, and thanks everyone. It was beautiful having you and having the insights from below somehow. And we look forward to more discussions and more ideas and implementations also in the design-a-thon. We would be happy to stay in touch, and thank you so much.
Now we get a question from Kaylin. Curious about how surveillance as a result of the COVID pandemic is playing out, how we use technology in a time of crisis, and how we then start to think of trust and privacy. Do you feel more monitored now? Maybe let's ask people to raise their hands if they do feel more monitored. So we have 21 people, and I'm curious how many people would raise their hands. And don't worry, I'm not going to give you the floor asking to explain why you feel more monitored. Well, there's one hand, one clapping, and one thumbs up. So Arik, one person, only one person. So Kaylin, so maybe that's already your answer. Only one, not even you, yourself. Kaylin as well. Okay, well, apparently not that many people feel more monitored, but yeah, I think we need to close here. Although I think it's an important question. You may want to write this on one of the links that were written in the chat, and then people can start answering on this, because that may give us some ideas for the Cairo Charter as well. The sense of being monitored and issues of privacy.
And also the role of the machine in the monitoring process.
Yes, totally. Thank you, Kaylin. And yeah, somehow you can do you can have the final words. I'm shutting up now.
Yes. Thanks a lot for the organizers. Thanks a lot for the organizers of prizes.